I wish every day was the same, but like every day there is a new sort of thing that pops up that absolutely requires my attention. I think that in the RevOps world, it's very easy to get pulled in a million different directions.
Welcome to RevOps Rockstars, in pursuit of unicorns. I'm David Carnes.
And I'm Jarin Chu. Join us as we interview RevOps leaders to explore the challenges they have faced, the biggest lessons they've learned, and what they think makes a RevOps rockstar.
This show is brought to you by OpFocus, on a mission to help companies run their businesses better by letting you focus on growth while we scale your operations. Let's get this show on the road.
Today's guest on the podcast is an ops leader with experience leading global teams at scale. She's had a wide range of ops responsibilities across sales strategy, monetization, marketing, business ops. She's brought her skills in the last number of years to LinkedIn, Slack, and now works as the head of revenue strategy and operations at Notion. Today on the show, we're really excited to invite to the podcast Namrata Ram. Welcome to the show, Nam.
Thank you, Jarin. Excited to be here.
Right off the bat, as you know, and as our audience knows, we love to get into the juicy stuff, the stuff that feels maybe a little uncomfortable, a little vulnerable. We love some stories. So first off, what is something in RevOps, sales ops, or any other kind of ops, biz ops, that you've had to learn the hard way in these last number of years?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different things that, have taken time to learn and investment to learn. The thing that I've had to go the deepest into most recently was around systems and technology, specifically around what a good sales stack looks like. And that comes from experience. Having gone through a lot of different situations where the connections between two different systems have broken, when we have made changes in one system, the other system has been impacted. A lot of those different learnings have come to light in the last, in my experience at Notion, that it isn't easy managing a tech stack and driving changes in these tech stack. And that needs to be like proper development processes and testing processes in place to ensure that you have you get the tools to do what you want them to do, which is to empower your sales teams. So that for me has been like some of the biggest learnings that I've had in my strat ops career. And it's interesting because like it isn't specifically strategy focused or, like deep, just that ops focused. It's been more technology focused. And given that I have an engineering background in the past, it was like good relearning for me, being like, hey, this level of rigor around software development has to be applied to, configuration changes and customization changes within your sales stack as well. So that for me is something that, really stands out as a learning moment in my strat ops career.
That's, I think, a great reflection, because as we advance in terms of our responsibility skills, our purview keeps on increasing horizontally as well. And there's some of these really fundamental things until we run into it and we're like, oh, well, that messed up. It brings us back to the basics.
Yes, it absolutely does. And I think that every time that happens, it's good to sort of go back to first principles and really think about what is needed to drive success and be able to bring that humility and learning and relearning to every single situation.
I love that you have an engineering background. I'm going to guess that a lot of the folks that come up through ops have either an FP&A or some other background, but not like pure engineering. So I think that's outstanding and really will serve you well as the tech stacks continue to evolve and get more complex. What size RevOps team are you working with these days?
Yeah, we're slightly under 10 people. And that's the size of our RevOps team. And we currently it would be, I want to make sure that we talk about the scope as well, because, there are different size RevOps teams and RevOps means different things in different companies. So our RevOps team covers sales ops, CS and CX, customer support as well as marketing ops. It most recently also had the BizTech function, as I mentioned before, but that has actually moved to a different leader within the organization. But it is a team that encompasses strategy and operations across the whole GTM set of functions.
Oh, that's great. And I'm glad that you clarified. I think we're always interested in understanding, because every company does have that different mix of responsibilities and functions within RevOps. So thank you for sharing that. So you've got your team of 10, you're spread out across the globe.
Yes.
How do you determine the right balance of in-house versus outsourced work?
That's such a good question, David, because it's a constant stream of questioning that plays out in my head. Like, do we need this as a permanent, a person being in there to address the needs, or is it more temporary, especially as we see ebbs and flows in terms of our workload? And I think RevOps sees it the most because, especially around planning period, there is a considerable amount of spike, and then it goes down and normalizes. So I think that it's definitely comes down to the specific functions and specific expertise that you need. So if you look at the ability to address certain needs through contractors, it is most easier in certain areas versus not. So for example, an area where we feel like the work can be sort of given away to an outsourced third party as long as we put the right processes together and we can focus on like higher level tasks, is around data cleanliness and entry, right? So that's an area where we typically invest in contractors because one, it does require a lot of, deep work, but the depth of the work and the complexity of the work is not that much. It's really about, repetitive tasks that you perform on a regular basis, and it's less about like strategic thinking or like deep analysis that needs to happen. So in that case, we are more than happy to outsource that kind of work to somebody such that it allows us to focus on things that requires the broader context, business context, as well as the deep thinking. So I think that as I think about my framework for what I would prefer to outsource versus house in within the company, I would say, number one, it's really about the complexity and the repetitiveness of the work, right? So that's one piece of it. So lower complexity, high similar tasks needed to be performed one after another. That's one piece that I would outsource. Second piece is around really being able to understand the availability of good talent within that space. So, data contractors are easily available and there is a lot of good data contractors out there. So that's another area. Salesforce contractors, I've also seen a lot of those, being outsourced because the teams may not have in-house functionality. There are some good Salesforce contractors that are out there that can help augment your current team as there are major projects that come in and out, right? So that's the second piece. And the third one is really around being able to assess what that ebbs and flows look like. Is there a spike versus not? And if there isn't one, I don't think you necessarily need those extra contractors. But if there is one, specifically around technology work, specifically around planning work, that ends up giving you the necessity to have to staff externally. So I think those three factors really play into, how and when you decide to resource externally versus in-house.
So you shared a bit about your team. I'm assuming they're spread out across the globe.
They are spread out across the globe, David. You got that right. So
how are you able to shut that off if there are, or is there any time zone where you get a little bit of a break?
Good question. I do work from around, I don't work around the clock, but I do work from around, let's call it 6 o'clock to about 8 o'clock. I do respond to pings, but then my team is a very understanding team. They know that beyond that, it's they try to get most of their questions in before within that time slot. And if they need anything beyond that, they know that, I will always get back to them in the morning or as soon as I wake up.
It's a real double-edged sword, right? Going global with the team just because of that. And I'm curious, just given the funding and given the growth, are you hiring?
Yes, we are hiring. We're hiring for some very exciting roles. We're hiring in the sales compensation partner as someone we're looking to hire. We're hoping to make our first hire on that side of the RevOps world. We're also looking to hire some folks in CS and CX strategy and ops. That's also an open role that's out there. So we're absolutely hiring. And so anybody interested, please reach out to me on LinkedIn.
You mentioned just now in talking about, the number of time zones you're managing, you're starting pretty early Pacific time, you're ending, kind of in the evening after. Give me a sense. I know it's going to change a lot given the spikes, the special projects you're pulled in. Give me a sense of what your day-to-day typically entails. What are the kind of big rocks you try to make sure you work on in, say, a given work week?
Yeah. I wish every day was the same, but like every day there is a new sort of thing that pops up that absolutely requires my attention. I think that in the RevOps world, it's very easy to get pulled in a million different directions, Jarin. So I think you got that right, which is like, there's so many different ways that you could potentially go about approaching your day. I like to remind myself in the beginning of the day is what are the 3 big priorities that I need to accomplish? Because if I don't remind myself every day that these are the 3 most important things, I can tend to get sucked into a lot of other things. So it's a good reminder to continuously, remind yourself and at the end of the day, calibrate being like, have I made progress across those 3 big things? Right. And so for me, I start my day with like just anchoring myself to the most important pieces that absolutely need to get done in the next 2 weeks or in that quarter or whatever that is. But like identifying your big rocks is the most important part of starting your day. And then there's a lot of work that goes into, you get sucked into meetings, conversations with cross-functional stakeholders, fire drills. And so the day goes on, but making sure that you spend at least, let's call it 30 to 1 hour of your time on these big rocks is incredibly important. So I actually asked my EA to block out at least, 1-2 hours in my day to work on those pieces. So my day-to-day just varies a lot on a regular basis, but the consistent part of it is around being able to make progress on those 3 top priorities.
Yeah. And I think most people we've spoken to where they really have this sense of direction, have some sort of habit or some sort of way to like start their day in the right foot. What are some examples of those, common or recent top priorities that have been on your radar? What are you trying to make sure, hey, I have a couple hours a day to make sure I'm pushing this forward?
Yeah. Some examples of this is, of course, planning for the next fiscal year, especially as, with the incredible growth to sustain that, there has to be a sizable amount of scaling that happens, especially for the sales team. So I think that is a focus area. How do you scale efficiently, responsibly, in a way that is best suited to capture the growth potential out there, but at the same time, you aren't like growing for the sake of growing. So that's one area that I'm focused on as a top priority, as an example. The next area that I am focused on is really around more building out the sales methodology piece. So enablement also falls under me, and I should have mentioned that in my when I was describing the scope of RevOps. So sales methodology and sales process, especially in a company that is scaling, it's incredibly important to establish because you are bringing in new folks at such a high clip that you want to make sure that they have some sort of prescriptive guidance in place because they come from varying backgrounds, they have varying level of experience. You want to have a prescriptive process in place. So sales process and methodology is another area that I'm really investing very deeply into because it's a foundational element that is going to help us really scale in the future. And the third piece of it is being able to build a proper sort of operating cadence for us, and not just forecasting and blah, 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 but like, how do you create these pipe gen programs where you are developing pipe, not just for that quarter, but like 3 quarters ahead? And how do you make sure that you're hitting these pipe gen targets, right? Because that's important. And then once you have the pipe, how do you make sure that you are executing on this pipe effectively through the right deal reviews, through the right checks and balances, all those features? I think that when people say operating cadence, they think it's forecasting. That's one piece of it, yes. But there's a lot of rigor around building pipe and making sure that you're closing out deals. That's a really important foundational part that is really important to establish right from the beginning, as opposed to, towards the middle of your scaling journey.
Yeah, I think the challenging thing, especially for folks listening right now in this year, 2023, where there's just still so much uncertainty in the market, where almost everyone we've spoken to have said, wow, it's felt a lot harder, is, in a good year, it's easy for us to say, well, let's look at not only this year, let's look at next year, let's look at the 3 quarters from now, 4 quarters from now, et cetera.
Yes.
And in a year like this, everyone seems to just be, well, what do we need to do to stay afloat today or tomorrow or like in a week? It's much more reactive. And I think what's remarkable is, obviously with Notion's growth, you're still able to maintain that level of strategic time horizon. You're looking ahead and you're not just saying, well, let's manage the demand coming in right now. How do we ensure we have the pipe some quarters or some years in the future?
Yeah. I think that it's always interesting. There's always going to be a balance of short-term initiatives versus medium-term initiatives. But the reality is that there are only a few levers that really change around performance overnight, or like in a very short period of time, especially with sales. Because the deals, depending on your deal cycles, right? So if you have a very short deal cycle, yes, you can, drive immediate change almost overnight. But usually in order for you to drive significant amount of change, it takes about 2 quarters in the sales world. So I have taught myself to set the right expectations. And I understand that being overly reactive is probably not the best thing, because then it can create a whiplash effect. And then you don't really know whether something has worked or not, because it takes about 2 quarters of data to be able to assess, is this working? Is this not working? Because there are seasonality assumptions in play. There's a lot of different things that need to happen. The uptake could be a lot slower depending on the size of the sales team. So I have set myself to believe that even if I am being reactive to certain things, I give enough time such that I'm able to truly assess, did that tactic work or not?
I love that. And, when we're on the topic of assessing, I'd love to hear from you, given that you do have so many functional areas that roll up to you. You're thinking about today and the future, these short-term and midterm projects. How do you effectively measure and track success in your own role? Like what to you in your position being so cross-functional will actually demonstrate, like, hey, this year didn't go by and I was only responding to fire drills?
Yeah, that's a great question that I keep asking myself every single day, right? What does success look like for me and my team? And I think the answer is pretty obvious to me, which is like you being the support engine or the strategic engine that drives all these different functions. You're inevitably tied to the success metrics that assess those different functions. So for sales, it's revenue. For marketing, it's inbound pipe gen. For CX, it's CSAT. For CS, it's utilization and churn. So all these different metrics that the teams are goaled on is indirectly your goal, because your job is to make sure that they are successful. And so as I think about impact, as I think about prioritization, I think about like, what are the initiatives that are going to move the needle on those metrics the most? And I prioritize that way, because it is just really important to tie yourself to the functions that you are supporting. And be laser focused on those things. Of course, all of those are lagging indicators, but there could be leading indicators, right, that you may want to track. So for example, for the pipe gen efforts we talked about, did you have a certain number of meetings and that you drove and that you were able to effect a change in trajectory? So suppose they were like, I don't know, having 10 calls a day. Were you able to get it up to 12 calls a day? And so I think it's not, the metrics itself is important, but driving change and continuous improvement across these metrics is probably something that you should, think about and focus on, because those are the initiatives that drive that change, is what you can attribute your success to. So that's how I think that I think about success for RevOps, although it's not easy. And there are a lot of factors, right? It's correlation versus causation. You can never really fully tie something out to one specific factor. I know that from running a ton of data analysis, but I do my best to see what the RevOps team can do to help with those North Star metrics and look at leading indicators that lead to those metrics and try to move those.
I love that. I think the incremental can sometimes be very, very meaningful because, like you said, it's hard to determine, was it something your team did? Was it something the hiring strategy resulted in? There's all these factors. So I want to take this just one more step deeper, which is there anything right now that's keeping you up at night? What types of ops stuff are you really trying to solve right now?
Yeah, I think the thing that is keeping me up at night is probably keeping a lot of people up at night, which is around the AI transformation that is, that we're all experiencing. And we want to be drivers and not just, we want to be in the driver's seat as opposed to just reacting to it. So I think about every day is like every time there is a certain sales problem that happens, or problem with certain sales like function, like, can we do this better through technology? Is something that is constantly coming up in my mind, which is, in almost every single part of the sales process, right? It is like prospecting. Can we do that better? How can we get the right intelligence? Whether it is outreach, how can we create customized cadences based on signals as opposed to, more standard cadences that we send out? Can we actually use AI, especially these LLM models, to come up with the right messaging and outreach? And then once you go to content creation, is there something that can help our sales team get the right ROI metrics easily and put that into an output? And then, of course, while they're having the conversations with the customers, is there a prompt that AI can give to help them better have a conversation? So all of these different things can happen, and we're in the face of some incredible change and transformation. And I think what we're going to see is that the sales teams that do get ahead are ones that are able to take advantage of this in a very meaningful way. And the ones that are, left behind will have to catch up at some point. And so what's keeping me up at night is, how do I make sure that Notion's sales team is at the forefront of this technological change that is happening. And so we're testing out a lot of different things within the team to be able to see what works and what doesn't work.
Can you share one or two examples that's getting you very excited right now in terms of how you're incorporating AI or LLM models internally for any team that's rolling up under you?
Yeah, I think the technology is still being developed. So we're trying to make some experiments to see what works versus not. But one of the things that we are considering is how you there's a lot of product usage, there's a lot of LinkedIn data on specific contacts in terms of what they do. How do you take that and build a personalized message in terms of outreach, right? So the biggest drop-off that we see is from outreach to meeting. And so if we were to improve that, talking about leading indicators here, if we were to improve that, then you're automatically going to see a pretty big impact on revenue. And so one of the things that we have found is that personalized emails do get, better responses. Personalized outreach on LinkedIn gets responses. So how do you build this personalized outreach to a large number of contacts. And if we can leverage the LLM models to try and create the right cadence outreach, then I think that that could be a very interesting way to engage customers, and that impacts, the top of funnel, the top of the sales funnel, which I think could obviously pull through a lot of different ways. Another way is that, we are looking at really being able to pull together the right resources, and some of this is still very, very early stages of experimentation, is content creation. Can you automatically create, and I think some of it already exists in different companies like LinkedIn and Slack, where they've pre-built some of the content creation for the sales team, but can you use the LLM models to go one step deeper, mine the gong calls, and come up with a prep document for the sales team to be here's some of the frequently asked questions that the customers have asked based on previous conversations. So being able to parse that information and give account specific insights is another interesting area that we could dive deeper into and that we're thinking about. And so those are some examples of specific areas where it is more easy. The harder one would be, coming up with some sort of prompting technology, but that one is a bit further away.
And out of curiosity, knowing that Notion's invested also a lot in your AI internally for your product,
yes.
Are there any ways that your go-to-market team, your revenue team is using Notion and its AI functionality to help with some of the things you've just mentioned regarding outreach, meeting setting, content creation, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of different teams a lot of different folks are experimenting with this a lot. And I can tell you how it's helped me. Right now, we have our AI writer functionality built in, which is very solid. So every time I create content, I'm able to summarize, or I'm able to improve writing. I'm also able to take in the meeting notes that I put in and, come up with action items and fill out a database, right? Because Notion's a connected workspace where you can, really make work happen. You're able to take conversation and convert that into action right within Notion. And I think the AI writer functionality already allows you to do that. And so now applying it to the sales context, I think that's a very similar. A lot of the sales teams are starting to do that, which is when they have cross-functional pod teams and they've had a customer conversation, being able to, take those meeting notes and convert it into a database that assigns different folks action items very easily is an area where, a lot of teams are starting to use this. Also in their prep and outreach, they are starting to use the Notion software to be able to create the right outreach for different customers, because a lot of our content lives within Notion. So they're able to pull together an effective email based on the Notion's best functionality that PMM created. And so in both those ways, people are already starting to use Notion AI to really transform their day-to-day work. And I think the more that you figure out how you should be able to do that, the better and more efficient your teams and yourself is going to be. So it's an exciting time for all of us, I think.
How exciting to hear about that. I think for probably a lot of us and a lot of our listeners, AI right now is a little bit of a plaything, with almost like a novelty, pull it out and try something. When my book came out, I asked ChatGPT, what would be a good strategy for marketing a new book on Salesforce analytics, and whoosh, came out the answer. So it's great to hear that Notion is taking advantage of its own technology in innovative ways. So Nam, you've worked at multiple product-led growth companies, from LinkedIn to Slack through the Salesforce acquisition and now Notion. What are some cross-functional corporate level initiatives that are unique to product-led growth operations?
Yeah, I think the cross-functional initiatives are very much focused on being able to leverage the online and product-led growth to be able to scale that further, right? So take the initial interest that comes in online to be able to scale that further into a wall-to-wall deployment or a broader relationship. And so a lot of the cross-functional initiatives span both the growth team. The growth team is typically focused on the driving the online acquisition of customers and the expansion within the online space. And then the sales teams are focused on taking that online interest that does come in and then expanding it to a more, long-term contract and long-term relationship and more expanded relationship. And so the cross-functional, initiatives often span, especially within PLG companies, span both the growth side as well as the sales side, coming together to figure out what are the ways to impact the full customer journey. And so an example of that could be how you onboard a customer after you sign a sales contract can be very much impacted from how they ended up using the product in the first place after signing up by themselves, right? And so a lot of the pain points that the customer success team is having here, there needs to be a conversation with the growth team in terms of how they are enabling onboarding right from the beginning in the automated workflows when people are signing up. So that's an example of a cross-functional initiative where CS is talking to product and saying, here's the pain points that we're seeing. What can be done right at the beginning of the customer journey to ensure that they're signing up for the product in the right way and they're using the product in the right way, right? So that's an example of a cross-functional initiative that you would see in a PLG company only, because in most other non-PLG companies, it's directly you're going through sales. That's your first touch point, and you're essentially going on you're setting on a different customer journey, and that's the beginning there. But oftentimes in a PLG company, once sales gets in, the customer has already had a decent amount of experience with the product. And so being able to drive that connection point between growth and sales to be able to say what is the best and optimal customer journey to drive full success is so important. And our examples where there has to be a cross-functional collaboration that happens almost regularly between the two teams.
It's funny. I'm thinking in my own experience, speaking to a user group in Charlotte last week about some new Salesforce analytics features, and one in particular that I'm really excited about. But it takes a checkbox to turn it on, and people are like, "Well, what do you think will stop people from using this?" I'm like, "It's the stupid checkbox." One team that's the product engineering team doesn't have control over the enablement features, and maybe these teams need to talk to each other a little more to smooth that out. It sounds great that at Notion that you've got that thought through, especially with that product, that growth motion of having people having had experience already with the product, and maybe it wasn't a good experience, and maybe I'd love to ask you about board and investor visibility. Do you interface with the board of investors?
I do present to the board on a quarterly basis.
And one of the reasons that I like to ask is that we have a lot of interest within the RevOps world. Some teams prep materials and present to the board. Others just will pull metrics together and create the stories around them. Can you share a little bit about your background with prepping board materials?
Yeah. So I think that, the board conversations should be as transparent as possible in terms of how we're doing and currently, basically where we want to go and how we're doing against where we want to go. Those are the things that you're trying to communicate, which is here's where we want to go, here's our strategy, here's how we're doing against it. And so that's essentially how I present some of or put together the materials. And the story very much is about, the journey that we're on to get to where we want to go. And it's a lot of focus on up-leveling the metrics, because otherwise as the RevOps teams, we have to go deep, right, in order to be operators. And oftentimes we could get lost in the detailed nuances. But I think when you're having a conversation with the board, it has to be more about a narrative that you're telling around the journey and the direction in which you are hoping to move. So it's not just about the metrics, but it's about the movement of what are the most important metrics. So I think that, a sample, an example narrative can be, hey, we want to get to $1 billion. and here's where we are today. And in order to get there, we need to improve this and this. And here's how we're doing in terms of improving this and this. All right. So that could be a sample narrative that you use to a board that could actually, give enough clarity on the direction and the progress that you're making quarter on quarter.
Yeah, I think it's great. One of the chapters in my book was about trending, and that's part of it. That's looking backwards, but I like the idea of the what you shared with the journey and the direction. So on the topic of reporting, and as this fits into technology, I'm curious, where do you go to get an at-a-glance view of how the business is doing?
Great question. Where do I go to get? There isn't one space. Obviously, I use Salesforce reporting. Having worked, in Salesforce, I am very familiar with some of the Salesforce reporting, and so I have my own reports and dashboards built in terms of where are we in terms of, our total ARR that's closed, incremental ARR that's closed, as well as what's our pipe and what's our coverage looking like, right? So I'm able to see that directly within Salesforce, and that's a pretty easy pull for me. Now, the more nuanced metrics around meetings and things like that, we have piped that into Salesforce, but the ability to view that is not as easy. And the ability to do cohort analysis is not that easy. So, for example, when you want to track lead fluency, this lead cohort, how did it do? You have to use like external data science dashboards. So I would say a combination of both Salesforce and data science dashboards is sort of what I use to get a sense for where the business is at.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious more broadly, is there a tech stack tool that you just couldn't live without?
A tech stack tool that I couldn't live without. I think that I have a lot of favorites. Some of my favorites are, I do like Gong because it gives you a lot of insight into the conversation. Oftentimes we say, okay, conversations happen. What is good, what is bad is going to be interesting. And especially again, with going back to this AI technology, I think we can do even more in like parsing out what customer sentiment is and things like that based on what people are saying over time. Something to definitely look at. So I do like that. And then I also, one of the other tools that I do use is also People AI, which gives me access into like emails and meetings and all of those different pieces. So I think that that's another area where I look at. I also look at engagement on Slack because a lot of reps now are using Slack Connect to drive conversations with customers, and they found it to be a much easier way of communication. So also engagement with Slack with customers is another important tool that I look at to be able to do stuff and analyze the input metrics of the sales teams.
Well, you've got a kindred spirit with Gong in Jarin here, so I'm sure she'd love to.
I could tell Jarin was smiling when I was saying that.
Yes.
In the first 35, 40 minutes, we've talked a lot about kind of your day-to-day work, your thoughts around how AI can help with go-to-market motions. I want to spend probably the last 10 minutes letting our audience get to know you a bit better. You're currently based out of Palo Alto in California, Tech Central. You've got your BTech in information technology back home in the National Institute of Tech in Karnataka. And then also you got your MBA from UVA's Darden School of Business. Previously, we've referenced a few times already, you were with Slack, you were with LinkedIn. Specifically, you were head of sales strategy and operations at Slack prior to joining Notion. How did you find yourself in RevOps and go-to-market ops today? What was this like long and winding road where you discovered, hey, operations might be my thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story for sure. I grew up in Bangalore. Let's start from the beginning. I'll give you a quick overview of sort of how I got here. Grew up in Bangalore and in India, and before the tech, so the IT revolution, it was a sleepy retirement town with great weather. But then the IT revolution came about, and like it transformed into a like solid IT hub. And I was quite enamored by that as a child, and so I decided to go into engineering, and so I pursued computer engineering in my undergrad and focused there because I was so enamored by it, and I really liked the problem solving element of engineering and being able to build things that I found very exciting as well, right? So both those pieces I loved, and so I said, okay, I'm going to go into and become an engineer. And my first job out of undergrad was to go into Intuit, and I worked on QuickBooks, which is an accounting software. At that point, it was desktop, and a lot of the work that I was doing was around trying to take it and make it more of an online SaaSified product at that point in time. So I'm probably dating myself here by mentioning this, but yeah, it was fun. It was almost like the beginning of like the SaaS sort of movement. And so that was my job. I liked it. I really enjoyed it. One of the things that you would find as an IC engineer is that you go very deep into certain problems and you have to write like how exactly things work. At that point, we were using C++ and Java. The thing that I felt that was missing was the breadth and the high level visibility. And so that's why I was like, okay, I want to try and explore more of the business side of things. So I went into business school and then consulting, because I certainly scratched that itch of breadth, especially with consulting, because I went to a lot of different industries, solved all these different kind of problems. And it was great. And I was like, okay, I've scratched that itch around breadth, which is great, but I really want to go back into tech because I loved being in tech and I felt like tech was the future, right? Having gone and worked in a lot of these other industries, I was like, okay, I want to go to the industry that is defining the future. So found myself back in tech and picked more of the business side of things, because now I had the business context. And I felt like I really gravitated towards go-to-market because I felt that, this is where the company's revenue engine lies, right? For the most part, especially as you think of B2B SaaS, this is where the revenue engine really lives, and make in realizing the customer value, as well as realizing the commercial and business goals of the company. And so I moved towards across different functions, and I built expertise across different functions to be able to really understand how to build a go-to-market engine that is very effective, efficient, and can realize the dream of a lot of different product companies that are like, hey, I have a great product. How do I realize my dream? You need a strong go-to-market engine. And so that's sort of what brought me to this space and this specific discipline, one could call, if one can call it that.
Yeah. And you bopped around. I can see, during your time at LinkedIn, you did some biz ops, you did monetization strategy, you spent some time in marketing. I mean, you really were trying everything, right? And you were heavily into sales strategy and ops by the time you got to Slack. Given that, your current role is head of revenue strategy and operations at Notion, and you've had some of this experience at other PLG companies like Slack, what would be advice you give yourself on day one of your current role? Is it like 9 some months ago now, looking back?
Yeah, I think that the advice that I would give myself is that be prepared for constant change and be prepared to adapt to it, and stick to, don't be afraid of sticking to first principle thinking, right? And so I think that is something that I would tell myself. The reason is, constant change when you move to a smaller company, everything changes all the time, and you just have to be used to it. And if you are stuck in one sort of mode of thinking, then you are going to be left behind. So constant change is really important. And I think that, 9 months in or 10 months in, I have like adapted to this movement and how quickly it moves, which I enjoy it. So that's one piece. The second piece is around, and this is, I've spoken to a lot of different peers who have gone into different companies, is that once we have experiences for a reason, and we have seen certain playbooks for a reason, and that's why you're brought into the company. But one of the things that I really tried to apply as soon as I got in is that, what is the thing that works the best for that company? And being able to put aside some of those experiences and really think from first principles on certain problems. You might find other problems where it's easier to implement a playbook, right? Versus going down and trying to solve from first principles. For example, systems changes in one area where you could you go and use some of the learnings that you've seen in the past. But in other areas where there is a unique product that you're taking to market, there is a unique customer value that you are providing, it requires a lot of deep, fundamental, foundational thinking versus like saying, oh, this is what I've seen work in the past, I'm just going to apply it here.
So Nam, you have a pretty amazing background. And I sense that you can go in pretty much any direction that you want. In an ideal world, what's next on your career bucket list?
I think that I don't know if I'd call my career an amazing career, but I think that I've had the privilege of learning from a lot of different people and companies in my past. So I'm very grateful for that. In terms of where I want to go in the future, I do want to move more into the sales side, and because I've played along the sidelines for so long, and I'm ready to be a player. And so I really do think that sales is likely the next move for me, and then really being able to uplevel that at some point to more of a CRO path. Is hopefully something that I want to pursue.
Well, maybe one of the tools in your tech stack that that you light up about when you talk about will hear this and ask you to come along.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
So leading RevOps is pretty intense. You talked about the hours you keep. You've got a team scattered around the planet. What do you do to unwind from the insanity of the RevOps role?
Yeah, I actually love to run. And so I have a Peloton tread in my house. And so I try to do 5 days a week, like go on at least a 20-minute run in like 10 minutes strength training. I love working out. And it just allows me to just, decompress and disconnect, and really, focus on a different side of things, which is challenging my physical abilities. And so I think that's fun. And I think that's one of the things that I really like doing.
No wonder you always seem so energized and calm, because you've got the workout in every single day. That's amazing. My last question for you, Nam, before we wrap up here is, are there certain resources or people, folks who talk a lot about RevOps that you personally turn to keep your go-to-market ops and RevOps thinking fresh? And maybe it's an opportunity for you to shout out anyone that you've worked with before. You're like, oh, this person has been amazing, taught me so much, or I've learned so much with working together. What kinds of resources would you recommend people to check out or people to follow?
Resources. Really good question. I actually spend a lot of time on YouTube researching AI and how it's going to change the future, and what are some of the top tools and workflows that it's going to impact. So I spend a lot of time just like Googling and like searching and researching on that. So that's one of the things that's honestly helped me keep my thinking up to mind, because the pace of change is rapid. It's like changing on a daily basis. Every day, there's a new trend, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to catch up. So there's a lot of FOMO that's going on, which I find really interesting, and I do like that. I do want to call out and shout out to some of the awesome folks that I'm currently working with, and that I've learned a lot from, and obviously, have seen a lot of growth with, some folks. My current CRO, Erica, she's amazing. She was GitHub's CRO as well, so it's great to learn from her. And I also worked with Bob Fraddy and Eli Wiener, both some great. Bob was the CRO at Slack, and Eli was the head of RevOps at Slack, and I used to report to him. So both great folks that I've learned from, and also my previous leader, Matt Heist, who used to lead finance for Slack, also a great mentor. So these are some amazing folks that have really influenced my career. So definitely want to give a shout out to them.
Amazing. This is an awesome crew. And maybe Eli or Matt or someone might hear this and they might want to join the podcast at some point too.
Yes.
Last but not least, where can people find you, Nam? Are you on LinkedIn? How can they find out more about Notion? What are the places they should be visiting?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I'm there. I am very responsive to InMail. So feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to get back and answer any of your questions or be ready to have a chat as well.
Great. And if they want to find out more about how Notion can help them, where can they find out more about that?
There's a lot of resources online around how to use Notion. You can learn about our different pricing options online as well. Very easy to get online, as you know, that there's like millions of users using Notion all over the world. So hopefully very accessible online. But if there's anything that I can help with, please reach out, and I'm happy to help you with it.
So Nam, this has been an amazing conversation. We're so appreciative of the time spent with you here today. It was so interesting to hear you talk about your daily three priorities that you focus on each day, and even allocating time in your schedule to ensure that you spend time on the big rocks. I appreciated hearing about the sales methodology and sales process work as the company's scaling and how that feeds enablement. I also really liked your comment on being prepared for constant change in this kind of a role. So it's really just such a pleasure to hear your enthusiasm and hear about your many experiences. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
And we'd also, of course, love to thank everyone who's been listening these last 30 some episodes. We're coming close to the end of season 1 here. So if you learned something today, if you've got someone in mind who you're like, this person would be great for the podcast, please reach out to us on RevOps Rockstars on LinkedIn, or ping David and I on LinkedIn. But today, so glad to have Nam share your experiences. We're so glad that we could spend the hour together. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jarin. Thank you, David. It's a pleasure.
And this has been another exciting, eye-opening, maybe we got to catch up on AI sort of episode for RevOps Rockstars. And we'll see everyone next time.
Stay classy, Rockstars.
And that wraps up another episode. Thank you so much for joining us. For show notes and other episodes, visit RevOpsRockstars.com. RevOps Rockstars is sponsored by OpFocus. Visit opfocus.com to learn more about how OpFocus helps SaaS companies scale their revenue operations.